with JBS, and among other things, I travel a lot and I write books and I do a few interesting things. This presentation is actually just a little bit of a snippet from a book that I've been working on for a couple of years now. Like most books, they always take longer than you think. So I thought, well, we're looking for a topic to talk about, and I floated a few ideas around with the crew, and everyone said, yeah, how to make 33% more income every 3 years. And I think it was Sarah went, that one, I want that one. So, this presentation today is not about how to be happier, it's not about how to be nicer, it's not about how to be more skilled. We're assuming that you're reasonably happy and that you work hard and do all the things in the real world, go the extra mile, make an effort, do the sort of things that you need to do at work. This presentation is just simply about a few practical tips, step-by-step approach to actually help you increase your income. Assuming as an undercurrent that you've already got the basic set of skills, but you are dissatisfied. If anyone's earning enough money and they don't want to make more money in your life, then you could probably leave now and save an hour of your life. This is just really about how to get to that point. In the end, you probably will be like this little happy chappy at the top, because it's all about having more options, and that's really the essence of what this is about. So, firstly, the question is, why listen to me? Because most people know me as a security dude, and this sort of stuff probably isn't really my thing. However, what I've done over the years is said, well, I'd like to make more money, and I've sort of concocted a few things that have worked for me, and that's basically my salary trajectory for the last 10 years. So I'll leave the numbers out for privacy, but that's actually how it works. It's not big enough, it's not in the 6 figures yet, but I mean, if that trend continues, I hope to be over there somewhere. There's a bit of a glitch in the middle there, or a drop, 3 years when it actually dropped. Well, those are 3 years that only work 7 months a year. So don't take too much of a little drop there. Basically, the trend is going up. One of the things that I would say is, I'm not a property developer, and in the security space, I'm not a gun runner or a international smuggler. Most of my money actually comes from salary, which is the blue bit. There's directors' fees and bonuses and shares and property and stuff. But ultimately, I'm basically, like probably most people in this room, most of my revenue comes from a salary. So here's the bouncing ball. We like to have simple steps in life. Really, 4 things, and we'll talk about this in the presentation today. So preparation, which is really all about giving us more choices and more options. And I always have a backup plan. So at any given point, I've always got 2 or 3 options for things that I can do, whether it's career-wise or job-wise or places to live. That's not to say that I'm not happy in JBS. In fact, I love my job, and one of the reasons I love my job is I only take jobs that I love. Right? I always have a couple of choices, and in fact, I've always got a backup plan. It's just that sense of, you know what, I'm not reliant on any one thing I have. I like where I am at a given time, but there's always a backup plan. So this is about giving you more options, because jobs can finish at any given point. They come and go, but hopefully it'll still be fun. The next step is just this application, and I'll go through each of these steps here. But really, this is just increasing opportunities for you to talk to people and be offered jobs. And the last process, going from interview to there, is just about earning a higher salary in this context. It's not about tricks or sneaky little tricks to help you earn more money, to convince people by deception. It's about actually earning the right to more money. And without having to go out of your way and reinvent it, and this is not about working 80 hours a week and just working harder, and we can all work hard. This is just a couple of things that have worked for me that have actually helped in my life. So I'll talk about today that old chestnut, sorry, I can't give you a job in leadership because you don't have any leadership experience. What do I do with that? There is a way around that catch-22. Why jobs can be better than, a lot of us think, it must be nice to be a consultant or own a business or own a cafe or what have you. And I'm sure I could make more money in business because everybody makes more money in business. Not actually true, and I'll come to that at the end of the presentation about how it compares. In many jobs, they ask for a long list of selection criteria. I've seen people respond with 10 pages in response to the selection criteria. If you put 10 pages down for selection criteria, you provide so much information that people go, oh no, they're a SQL Server expert, we need an Oracle expert. You can put in information which will allow you to be excluded from it, and what you're trying to do is make people curious. So 2 pages is all you need, and I'll show you the template that I've used, which has worked time and time again. So some resume mistakes, how to build a rapport, and how to feed jam whilst actually sounding quite modest in the scheme of things. So preparation. This is not a seminar about networking, but the point is, it is a really important skill, but you can do all of these things. We all know a large range of people, and there are discussion groups online, and you can go and have a cup of coffee with people, you can go to presentations, you can come to places like this and just talk to people, because that's what networking is about in my world. It's just about talking to people who you have a genuine rapport for, and a level of affection who you just enjoy each other's company. And from that, you find the opportunities. So there are courses out there you can talk all day about how to network. Bottom line for me is just do it, talk to people, have enough people that can be advisors and mentors. So it's not about the job hunt, it's not about anything necessarily. It's just people to bounce ideas off, people that in this room there'll be so much information about new ways of self-improvement, new opportunities out there, what's happening in different departments. So that's the foundation of the start. Get a good network of people. And I'll say people, the old sort of networking idea that was put up in the States years ago was about you come to a room like this and you hand your business card out like Coca Ninja throwing out shuriken around the room. Shuriken are the pointed stars basically, you're aware of those. If you come to a place like this, you're better off talking to 2 or 3 people in depth, I think, than talking to 30 people and just skimming, because you're just not going to remember anything, you're not going to forge any relationships. And that's enough of that topic, because that's a whole day in itself. So one of the things I'd say about education, and this is the scheme, it doesn't matter whether you talk about doing, in some fields, going and doing a forklift driver's ticket is the appropriate thing. In Canberra, typically doing a master's degree is probably the benchmark you want. And I would say a couple of points on that is, if you've got 5 or more years experience in the workforce, and you don't have, even if you don't have a bachelor's degree, if you're thinking about doing a bachelor's degree, you're probably better off going and doing a master's degree. And if you're not confident that you haven't done tertiary work before, or tertiary education, start with a graduate certificate. Because while a bachelor's degree really, in my view, is just enough to demonstrate a level of competence. But if you've got 5 or 10 years experience already, you've demonstrated that. But one of the big points out of picking some education is about you should expand your options. So I'll give you an example. When I looked at doing a master's, I looked at doing the Master of Security Science. And when I looked at it, it actually sort of funneled me down to being a security person. But I already had, by that point, 10 or 20 years experience in the security world. So I looked at the option of doing an MBA, and an MBA said, well, this is a world of management, it's huge, but it doesn't actually differentiate. So I looked at the Master of Risk Management, because for me, that opened doors. That allowed me to work, whether it was finance or construction, government, in any sector. So it's the same thing if you look a little laterally. Think about something that you love, which will give you the most options. A psychology degree these days is actually quite an interesting avenue for working in OHS, working in a range of topics, organisational change. But that last one, if you're thinking about doing something, definitely do it. If you haven't got a qualification that you think is appropriate, I'm not saying you should go and do a master's, you might want to go and do a diploma, you might think you just want a particular thing, but even just putting down on your CV currently studying is going to differentiate you from the world of people out there. 2 people like for like at a job application, if they're equivalent in all areas, you're going to pick the one who's already said, I am committed to my personal development. I'm the person who wants to get ahead and I'm currently studying in this field. So just little things like that worth thinking about. At the end I'll leave room for questions, but I guess if I go too fast, jump in with a question. We'll try and respond to that. And this is the catch-22 point where I had people in an organisation that I worked for a few years ago. A couple of people were applying for a team leader's job, and the discussion when they'd come to me, and so they worked with me at the time they were applying for a job, and so I couldn't give any preference there or advice, but simply that the generic advice I did give was that they would come and say, look, we want this job, we want to get some leadership experience, so how about you give us a job so we can get the experience? And I'm like, well, here's 3 or 4 different ways you can gain that experience. And one of the easiest ways is just go out and do what a lot of people do. If you don't have that, and it could be any sort of skills, go and volunteer. Go find an organisation, whether it's your local footy club, or if you wanted to be particularly focused, go and volunteer as an officer in the Project Management Institute, or if you're an accountant, go to CPA Australia or an equivalent like that and say, look, I'd like to be part of the volunteer program, I'd like to take a job on the board or as a committee member or what have you. And not only does it give you leadership experience or project management experience, whatever you want, you can actually demonstrate that for even volunteer fire brigade. If you've got 3 years of leadership experience as a team leader in the volunteer fire brigade, hello, you can demonstrate leadership experience. It's also great networking, come back to that former point, because through that you'll find, especially if you're a little bit canny, and yes, it is a good thing to do. I actually volunteer in a host of organisations, and I believe it's a good thing to do for the community. That's not what we're talking about today here. We're just talking about it being profitable for you. So pick something that is strategically aligned with what you want to do. So if you want to work in area X, go find out what the professional association is for it, become a member, turn up at a meeting and say, can I help? Can I take the minutes? Can I be the treasurer? They're always the key jobs nobody wants to do. But you know what? You get noticed, and you will get in it. And believe it or not, I know we're all busy, and we have hobbies and kids, and we have a range of activities. But if you can put aside an hour a week, the leverage you'll get from that hour a week will be quite extraordinary. So you've got all your skills. We've done this. I'm rattling through this very quickly. I could probably talk for about 2 days on this topic. I could even write a whole book on it. Job hunting, again, is not that difficult. We've got seek.com. There are a whole range of job forums on LinkedIn, and people quite often advertise, and I've seen it's been very effective for a number of people. When they have LinkedIn, they actually put up on their status looking for a job, and they go out to their network and they just ask people if anyone's heard of anything, and that multiplier effect of 6 degrees of separation, or in the LinkedIn world, it's about 2 degrees of separation now. So be a little bit broader in that, but what I would say is this process is about always having a discussion. So you always know, just through your networks, you're always a little bit aware of what's out there. Not because you might want to change jobs. You might be absolutely perfectly happy and fantastically love the job you're in. So I'm not saying go off wandering. But you know what? People get made redundant. Different bosses come in. And sometimes the dream job, the absolute perfect dream job, will turn up for you because you just had your ears open without actively hunting, just being aware and talking to people and thinking about what you want. We had this conversation in the car over here the other day, and talking about someone I know who said, I don't know what interested in working as a tradesman, I've been doing that for years, and I'm just waiting for my dream job to come along. I said, great, I really commend you on that. It's exactly what I sort of look at. So I said, so what is your dream job? I don't know. I'll help you find your job, introduce it to you, meet me halfway, tell me what you want to do. So have that idea in the back of your mind, because the radar, it's like the white falcon syndrome. We buy a white falcon, we see white falcons everywhere around us suddenly. If you know what you're looking for, you'd be amazed what we just filtered. Our brain filters out 99% of information. Something like 2 terabits of information around us, and we can cope with about 138 bits per second of data. Our real world attention is very limited, but if the unconscious is looking for it, you'll find it. The purpose of your job application, once you've found a job to apply for. And I've seen people agonise over the letter they put in, and agonise over the resume, and try to make it technically correct and get the dates right. And it should all be true and honest and all these things are important, but you know what? It has only one purpose. The job application letter, the response to selection criteria, the CV has only one purpose in the entire world: get you an interview. So bear that in mind in the whole process. It does, however, have a couple of secondary purposes which I'll come to. But this whole be succinct. This is the last job application letter I wrote. It was in 2004, last time I needed to apply for a job, because I did the whole networking thing. And pretty much at any given time, I've always got opportunities that are there, should I choose them. But this is one I wrote for the Austrade job, and that was the letter and the response to selection criteria. So, and the feedback from my boss, who eventually hired me, were a couple of things. One, she said at the interview I was enthusiastic, which I was, because it's a really cool job, and that's me anyway, which helped me stand out. But so I read this, and it was a little bit short. I went, you know what, I just don't know that I can really see enough of this, but it piqued my curiosity. There was nothing in there that eliminated me. It was just enough to say, this is what I've done. And to zoom in on these first couple of blurry points here, essentially there were 6, so I proved leadership management skills. So I just put in a table and said, this complex environment, staff up to 200. Numbers are good. Team leader, and at the bottom of each one I put in italic a qualification that reflected the requirements. So properties, specialty. Now I had a lot of other short courses and long courses and various qualifications, but I just cherry picked one. I've used that format, it's a 2-page letter format, and progressively tweaked it over a number of years. And you know, the last 5 times I used it, I got 5 interviews. And it's just a bit of a charm. So if you would like any of these, do email me. After the email address is at the end, I can send through a copy of it so you can use it. It's easy, it's quick to write too. So here's the other purpose of a resume. You just want to tweak the curiosity of the person who's recruiting you. But this second purpose is something that people forget. It's a little bit like, you know, if I turn around to Sarah and I say, yes, Sarah, you got the job, I really want to hire you, and then I've got to go around to my boss, Miles, and say, this is the person I chose, and the reason why I chose this person is because they've got all these skills, and here's their resume. Now, they probably won't, you know, typically bosses isn't actually necessarily going to read the resume in any detail. They might skim it, but the fact that you've got a comprehensive skill set, the CV is actually for selling further up the line. You clear? Won't get you a job, but it will help make it easy for the person who wants to hire you. And that whether you're a consultant or an employee, it's exactly the same process. And take anything out that could get you excluded from contention. The question, should I tailor my CV? Absolutely. Unless the job is so perfectly designed for you that you could have written the job description yourself, you always need to read it. So, tell the story. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Something like, depending on whose stats you believe, between 30 and 70% of CVs contain falsehoods, lies, errors, omissions, and sometimes outright lies. We've got plenty of stories about people who put down their PhDs and their MBAs from XYZ business school, and it turned out 20 years later that despite being able to do the job, they were sacked ignominiously for having lied years ago. Don't lie. However, you don't need the whole truth. They don't want War and Peace. They don't want to know that you had issues with your previous boss. They don't want to know exactly whether you're a C+ programmer or a C++ programmer. Unless it's actually relevant to that job, just leave it out. I don't know about you, but most of us are busy, and the shorter a CV is, the more likely it's going to get read, the more impact it's actually going to have. So it's the opposite of doing a consulting report with a thunk factor, i.e. the noise it makes when you put it down on the desk. It should make not a sound. So, put down everything that is relevant to that particular job, whether it's IT role, the ability to use MS Office, the ability to read between the lines. How many times have you seen job ads where it says something like, must have strong influencing skills and strong interpersonal skills, and you know exactly they're recruiting for a job and the last person left because they were a grumpy bugger who couldn't get on with anybody. You think, okay, talk about my great ability to get on with people. So read between the lines of that and emphasise the bits that are important to them. The one there is, I'll go into this in more detail. Do include some information about past employees. I've known people who've worked for companies like Woodside or BHP, household names in Australia, but even so, not that many people know much about them, in fact. And there's plenty of major multinationals that nobody else has heard of, so I'll give you some examples about what that looks like. Numbers, put in numbers. If you're good with people, how long have you been good with people? How many people did you manage? How many people did you work with? What was your responsibility? Play with those numbers and let people think about it. So these are just some highlights of what should be in there. Now, fairly obvious. Credentials there is any post-nominals, indeed even if you've got membership, or if you're a fellow of an organisation, or you're a certified practicing accountant, or you've got any sort of an extra post-nominal, that's highlighted up the front. And this one here, I have a section at the back of my resume which talks about my experience in other organisations. So it's designed to complement without actually saying, here's my work experience as a paid employee, but here's the directorships I've done, here's my Army Reserve experience, here's that sort of thing. So it paints a picture and it triggers something. If you were in the volunteer fire brigade, it's worth putting that in. It's not necessarily going to work for you, but if the person who's doing the interviewing has a strong volunteering ethic as well, you're going to establish a connection there. It also gives you a chance to say, I understand A, B and C, particularly whether it's team leadership or if you're going for a safety job, then you'll highlight the aspects of it that relate to that. Don't bother putting that in. Unless you happen to be going for a job as a unarmed combat instructor, don't bother mentioning you do karate on the weekends. It can paint a picture in people's minds. A lot of people have biases. We all have our biases. So if you put in that you're into macrame, then someone might say, oh, you know, no ambition, happy to sit by the fire doing macrame. That may be completely untrue, but people's biases start coming to effect. So you don't want to give them a tag to hook onto, unless, as I say, it's absolutely relevant. And I'd say this, different people have different opinions, so I'm just giving you my opinion as somebody who has read hundreds of resumes and hired dozens, probably even 100 people over the years and gone through that process. If it comes up at interview, you know, it's a good opportunity to find out. So if there's a way that you find out along the way, you're talking about, do you happen to ride a motorcycle, the interviewer rides a motorcycle, don't drop in that I rode to the interview by motorcycle, but just be mindful. If you go in there and there's a series of tennis trophies on the wall, you know you've got something in common if you play tennis as well. So be a little bit, have the opportunity there to share and build rapport, but don't turn around and say, I go pistol shooting all the time, because that may have some negative connotations for some people. So that's pretty much my CV. I'll show you a couple of little highlights from how that looks in the scheme of things. So that whole process tells about your employers. So if you go and work, if you're working for a Commonwealth agency now and you go and work in the private sector, nobody knows in the private sector, or very few people, that FACSIA actually has 4,000 people. Half the people in BHP wouldn't know that Australia's largest international network is Austrade. Never assume that people actually know anything about their employer. Even if you work for Shell or BHP, it's quite possible you've been recruited by someone who's come from overseas and has never heard of those companies. So put it in context. And this is the sort of thing that I put in there. Woodside Energy operated part owner of Australia's largest $22 billion for Shell. So sets the scene, starts to tell people this is a significant player, this is a company of national significance. Likewise, when I worked in Malaysia, I worked for a company called PT Copatin, who no one outside of, in fact, I know no one outside the island of Bunker has ever heard of, quite frankly. But it's a huge mob. It works, you know, one of Malaysia's largest resources group, does mining, smelting, exploration. And in fact, there's other snippets in there where you covered a 2,000 square kilometre lease area. So you really need to think about how can you add in something that says, oh, okay, now I've got people's attention. It's not just about Julian did X, Y, and Z. Well, who cares? Did he do X, Y, and Z for Tom's shoe shop, or was it for somebody with a global portfolio? So that's the same sort of thing. Again, I said, okay, so that's what Australia does, and that was my role involved. You see that, you know, involving protecting 1,300 staff at 120 locations, 60 countries, portfolio of 200 properties. Straight away, you've actually given people a chance to, and you're going to come to interview with all that in your head. So when people ask you about it, I'll come to how you share that and how you look brilliant. It's one of the common resume mistakes I made. In fact, I'll give you an example of someone I recruited at Austrade who put in a CV. It was for a training job, and she put down something like worked for Cunning Regiment now, parachute training school, and developed an upgraded training program. And the L&D manager at Austrade looked at it and went, no, you know, so what? So well, hang on. Because I had been in the military, I could actually walk through and say, designing a military training program is a really rigorous, thorough process. And and if it had been up to the L&D manager, Tom, this person who we subsequently hired wouldn't have got a job. But later on, it helped to rewrite a resume in future years. But essentially, what she'd actually done there was a significant piece of work, far more training, development, design than most people do in the private sector, because it's a very comprehensive process. But she had one line about it, scarcely a sentence to describe it. So, had it not been for the fact that I knew a little bit about military training, she would have missed out on that job and we would have missed out on a great employee. So you could be an ex-great employee. And by the way, this applies equally to internal jobs. If you're going within, you're just looking for a promotion within the same organisation, even in the same section, what you did for the RSPCA 3 years ago probably doesn't mean anything. But if you managed a national rollout of a program facilitating donations or whatever it might be, put it in there. Because your boss now, who's looking to promote you into the next job, probably doesn't know actually the scope of the things you've been doing on weekends. So that whole never resume. So, there's some other examples, and you can download this presentation from the web later on and I can send you some snippets. But again, this whole, with Australia build a $60 million NPP, new policy proposal, so I put in brackets business case, because outside the government, nobody knows what an NPP is. They don't realise you're building a huge funding program. The numbers, $1 million security safety training, 200 properties, 60 countries, same, 30 staff, 24-hour security services. These are all 700 logged hours, this is going back in years now. All the snippets from my CV. And you'll find there's plenty of examples if you dig around. Okay, so that's not exactly huge. I mean, there are other areas where I'd save sort of 2.5% of $1 million budget. Well, it's still $25,000, so it's worth writing it down. That's all you've done. Pick the biggest ones. And it sounds pretty fancy when you do 3 projects and you have concurrently managed projects to da-da-da-da. So a little bit of it is actually just sitting down and thinking about, if you did something cool, then there's got to be a metric, there's got to be a reason why you did it. And there's got to be a way to measure it, because somebody thought it was worth doing, and someone else thought it was worth measuring, and somewhere there was a business case for you to do Project X. So what was it? And again, this sort of stuff, safely, so we define what does safely mean. No one was hurt, risks were identified, managed by applying techniques, etc. So just little snippets that walk people through. So, the interview. I said the Australia job and that basically every other job, be enthusiastic, let people see it. Show that you've got a commitment and that you've made some interest to find out about the employer. And even if it's, again, within your own organisation, the more you know about the pressures. So when you go in an interview panel, you probably have people from different organisations or different divisions within that organisation. So it might be someone from human resources, it might be someone in the direct line of command, it might be someone who's just volunteering, coming for another section completely. But if you understand the pressures of that organisation, whether it's going through organisational cultural change, whether it's budget pressures, whether it's been in the press recently, if you actually understand those, then at the right time you'll be able to have that discussion and show that you actually made an effort. So here's a little technique I use for telling people how good I am. So instead of just walking and going, blah, 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 I'm good, I did this, I did that, I can manage $1 million projects, I can do such and such, I can get on with people, which would probably not be the job, wouldn't if I was interviewing him. Situation, action, and result. So, write down a list of things that you're really good at, the things that you've done well. And it really wouldn't matter if you just happen to be the best person in the entire building with Microsoft Word. Put it down. Put this list of things down. If you happen to be very good at getting on with people or making great cups of coffee, write it down. This is just a brainstorming exercise to walk through all the things that you think. If you just had an opportunity to sit down with me as an employer and say, guess what? If you had an opportunity, what would you tell me? And it's in your mind, and it should be related to what you want to do, what you enjoy doing. Not just what you're good at, but where you want to go with things.
Excuse me. Do you use the SAR to put in the selection criteria?
No. This is now at the stage where you're about to be interviewed. So you've actually been invited to interview. And then I sit down and I think about SAR as a preparation.
Why not put SAR in the address the criteria?
Too much information. It could get you weeded out. If you talk about a story which has a particular focus, See, when I do the SAR, I'll end up preparing probably 20 stories. So there's too many to put in, and I'll use whichever one is at the right time in response to how the flow of the interview goes. You might find with SAR that you have a story and people say, well, you know, I don't really care about your influencing skills. That's just wasting my time. Well, this one, so each one has a story, and then I'll think of a list of typical questions. And you just Google it, you can find a list. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are you good at? Give me an example of a time when you had to deal with conflict in the workplace. Give me an example of a time when, how did you go with the last project? So these are all pretty standard. What do you think you can bring to the organisation? You can find them online. And then basically, the stories about that, so you think about a project management story, a project that you managed, a story that illustrates it, and then link it to a question. So it looks like this. Tell me about how you coordinated an awareness program. So what I really want to say is I'm great. I'm really good at coordinating an awareness program. But you've got these stories, and so when they ask a question, and let me say you could actually use the same response to a different question, but you'll be guided by it. So, situation, first proposed a risk management framework of health, struggle to get senior management attention. Now this, I actually bullet point this, I made a sentence out of it, so it's, when I write it down, it's a short snippets, just type down on a page, and the flow of the words will be different each time. So it's not that you memorise a script, it's just that you write the story as you remember it. So, arranged the assistant secretary presentation to take place following a normal senior management meeting, kept it short and concise, result unanimous support. So what you're basically saying in here is, gosh darn, I'm good. I managed to get this program rolled out by using a sensible approach to gain senior management attention, and when I got a chance to present with them, I wowed them and they invited me to come back. Now, it's a little bit more powerful to say it that way than just say, I managed to really impress the senior management team with a great presentation. Because now you're actually responding to their questions, you're not telling your story. So another example where people would say, give me an example when you had to deal with conflict in the workplace. And I would say something like, well, when I was at Woodside, we had a challenging property relocation program on, and a lot of the senior management, it was a $2 million program, and so it had been going on for years. When I was brought in, I had to take over a difficult program. Some of the senior managers and the general staff were quite anti it, so I had to go around and spend a lot of time. They might say it a little bit more formally. But essentially, I'd say something like, I spent a lot of time negotiating with the senior stakeholders, talking to the staff, understanding their problems and issues, revised the project plan and updated it so that it could come in now on schedule as agreed, and I arranged alternative accommodation for people who had to be displaced that was to their satisfaction, and when they came back in, the project was on time, under budget by $400,000, and we also achieved a superior outcome with a whole new fit out, which gave people different workspaces. So in essence, I'm saying that I managed a $2 million project, I brought it in under budget, I'm very good at influencing people, and gee whiz, I'm the guy to call in when you have a problem that hasn't been resolved. But what have I done? I've answered your question. And because I already had the story in my head, it seems that I've just off the cuff answered the question. So I end up with a series of these. Same sort of thing. Have a few stories in mind, and really, all our stories. We can all tell stories, but they're written in 3 paragraphs, and they demonstrate key points of, gosh, I'm good.
I think one of the standard follow-up questions is, what do you learn from these situations?
Yeah.
How do you do it differently
Yep.
next time? So how do you answer those things?
Same. I have another question that usually, if you see the full list of these, usually after that, I'll often have and what would you do differently? Or what did you learn from that? Exactly. And I say, well, I learned, for example, that, different areas of the group had spoken different languages, so when I worked with the engineering team, I had to use their technical approach, and so I learned the skill set. Next time I did it, I would actually spend a bit of time learning the language of the HR department, finance department, and the engineering. Or now that I've done this project, I now understand how to speak at the right level for engineers, human resources, finance, and the environment group, and that's how I would approach it differently next time. But yeah, it's a very good question. The lessons learned you take away from it. So, What I do before an interview is I will find somewhere quiet, whether it's a quiet coffee shop or anywhere that might be, and I'll sit down and I'll read through probably 2-3 pages of the stuff, so the stories are fresh in my head. And so when someone asks me a question, I'm not having to remember the story, it's just there. I'm just actually thinking about selecting a story which illustrates the point that I want to make, which responds to their question. And I'll have a cup of coffee, because the caffeine will open up your blood flow, stimulate you to be more alert. If you don't drink caffeine, you'll find a substitute. You'll make sure you've done all the right things, you're well rested the night before, you're hydrated, you're relaxed. Just sit and chill. Reading a book is what calms you down, or walking in a park. And you just take all those, put everything in your favour and have this stuff in your mind. So, be pleased to see them. And you should be, because they've done you the favour of giving you the chance to tell them just how great you are, which is really what it's all about. So, make a good first impression, and then burn it into your brain. Is anybody here not good with names? Show of hands. Right, here is the single most powerful tip I have for any of you to be good with names.
Write it down.
No? Start telling yourself from day on, I am good with names. Get that self-talk happening, because that is the thing which will make the biggest single difference. Now you can do a whole bunch of other tricks you can do from there. When you shake someone's hand, have an emotional, like just that on the inside, don't go, please me, Fred. But make an emotional imprint with it. So Fred, Mary, and then repeat it a few times. In fact, even if you got a chance to go, hi Fred, yeah, nice to meet you. Even if you just repeat it in your mind, just burn it in. Don't write it down in an interview, that's get you marked down. But and that's one of the things that I, standard question for interview as well. So, and it's true. Right? And people say, well, how do you approach a task? If we were to give you this job, what are the things that you would do that have been successful in the past that you did? I said, well, one of the things is I make an effort to remember people's names, just to get to know people. When I walk into an organisation, you start with the little things. Don't try and over-engineer it. Get to know people. Remember their names. Find out who they are. Find out what their issues are. But it's a really powerful thing. So there you go. Got 90 seconds. Use it to good advantage, because if you make a powerful first impression, half your job is done, almost. One of the ways to make a good first impression is to obviously dress well, speak well, articulate clearly, let your whole face smile when you do smile, but also mirror and match the postures. So match this. If people speak quickly yourself. If they speak slowly, speak nice and slowly. If someone's sitting, leaning on the desk board, gently, without being, complete mimic of it. You don't want to be exactly mirroring someone, but match pattern. So try and be at the same level in the room. This is just common sense. So if you're all sitting at the same level, you're sitting roughly in a proximal sort of position, not invading anybody else's body space, So if someone's sitting back, relax, sit back. Remember to breathe. Do all those things that just establish rapport. Give people a chance to like you. It's like the old story, the universe will provide if you get out of your own way. Let them like you. People want to like you just as we want to like other people. So don't stress about trying to make a good impression, just let it flow. And here's my biggest tip. 2 ears, 1 mouth. And this goes anywhere in the world. No matter what you're doing, whoever you're talking to, people you think, if you ever walk down and say, they're a great conversationalist, I really love talking to them, odds are you did most of the talking. And that is half the battle. Be interested in people. Give them a chance to speak. Now, you notice I use the words success proportional to the amount of time you spend listening. So that's not the percentage of time. You don't want to walk in there and let them talk for 100%. You go, it's not going to work. But as a rule of thumb, they should do 2/3 of the talking. They want to tell you about the role. They want to tell you what they're looking for. They want to give you a chance to know, and you're listening to this and gathering information. And like I go, that person's a really good listener. I think they'd work well in our team. Too many, that's a real schoolboy error. Schoolboy, schoolgirl error. Talking too much, trying to cram in this great conversation of, I'm really good at this and I did that and on the weekend I did this and and at the end the interviewers just go, okay, thank you for coming. I'm exhausted. I don't want to work with that person. And the last one, a lot of interviewers as well will have a scribe. Thank everybody, thank the receptionist, thank the scribe. Just be polite, because they gave up your time, and you might think, oh, the scribe didn't say anything there, they're not doing anything. They're the person who writes the notes up. And in most organisations, certainly when I do an interview, I pick a scribe who's got some experience, got some interpersonal skills, who's a good listener, understands it, and I will ask them their impression. What did you think? Because I'm busy asking the questions and responding and communicating. They're just listening. And they're the people who will often, if you picked a scribe on, will really, and I will add, by the way, if you haven't already picked up, you can reverse this. So when you're interviewing, a lot of this stuff is going to work for you. If someone doesn't establish rapport very well, if they talk too much at interview, that should be a red flag for you. When I was, this is years ago now, it's in my 30s in the North West Shelf, I found the surest way to find out if I wanted to hire someone, because it was a frontline job, security, emergency response, communications, a whole bunch of jobs. First aid clinic, they had to be good with people. They had to be concerned and care about people. And they would come in and dazzle me with their wit and repartee and establishing rapport. In particular, the girls, one boy, so they'd come in, bat their eyes out. She was really interested. As in, she was interested in me. She was interested in the job. And likewise, guys would come and regale you about great stories of what they'd done. And in the end, my shortcut to finding the right person, I'd walk out and I'd ask my secretary, so how do they treat you? And Trish and I had this thing down patch, but just so rude, wasn't interested. Hardly talked to me. Ignored me like, okay. Oh, they were lovely. They were really just so polite, and they came in nicely. The body language was good. Really, at the end of the day, that was the single biggest weighted criteria. If they had the skills and experience, how they treated my secretary was how I judged their ability to be part of the team. Anyway, you're right, so I'm teaching you how to, they're very obvious here. So, last but not least, how to grow your income. So, we'll talk about why some of this is important. So, getting a raise. Anybody here a little bit of trepidation of asking for a raise? And you two can be quiet. Yeah, it can be a little bit daunting doing it, and sometimes we just don't know if we're warranted or how the boss is going to respond, or it can be crushing having someone say, no, really, that's probably all that's going to happen. But you increase your chances of earning a raise if you've actually done the homework, and you can articulate to your boss or whoever the budget holder has to be to make that decision why. So you've done your masters in XYZ, or you've done a diploma in project management. But could I take on, I'd like to increase my income, got a new family, I'd like to buy a house, so I'd like to increase my income, and I've looked around, I've seen all these other jobs that I could take on as part of my role. So I've now been doing this job for a year and a half, but I think I've covered everything off. I can do it in less time. I have a bit of spare capacity, and I've thought about A, B, and C. That makes a really easy, compelling case for your boss to say yes. And you know what? Guess what? Most bosses want to give you a raise. There are budget constraints, there are corporate policies, there are guidelines and limitations, and in the commercial sector it's about profitability as well. But you know what, most people actually, if you're working well and you're valued and you're a nice person, and especially if you say it's because I want to buy a house, because I want to send my kids to a better school, you've articulated a reason for it, most people want to give you a raise. Your job is to figure out all of that and say why, what's the business case, much like the CV is the chance for your boss to impress their boss, but this is the right person I've hired. They have to take it up the line and say, well, this is why I believe this person's worth more, because they're taking on extra jobs, they now have these capabilities. Since they started, they're now doing A, B, and C that wasn't in the original job specification. And the last one, not the last one there, but if you think about what would I earn in a similar role elsewhere, that's also part of your barometer to say, okay, well, it's about what I'm earning now. Okay, well, it's probably what the job's worth. Or I can earn $20,000 a year more doing the same job elsewhere, so I really need to articulate that and politely let my boss know that you're not going to keep me unless you can match that. So that's the... Is that useful to anybody? Yeah, no, it's pretty basic, but when you put it all out and lay it out, it hopefully makes sense. Again, let people know if you'd like a promotion, you'd like to do something different, find out what it is that you're passionate about that will really float your boat. Don't just go for the classic I've seen in probably any large organisation. The public sector is much the same as well. You go through a point where you're technically proficient, technically good, you keep getting promoted to the top of a technical role, and then your next step, if you want to earn more money, you've got to go into management. And guess what? A lot of people are just not interested in management. That's the reality of it. They like what they're doing. They really enjoy the technical skills. They actually don't want to work with people, but there's not an avenue for them to be promoted up and to earn more money except in a management role. So to be a little bit lateral about it, there are contractors now in defence doing essentially technical roles, and we've got a few of them in there, who are getting paid more than the person they're reporting to. Now they do take a risk because it's a contract basis there, but it's the only way that our client can get the skills that they need in at that right price. Because they don't need managers and they don't have justification for another director level job, but they actually want people who've just got that in-depth knowledge of a particular topic, whether it's capital models or procurement or whatever it is. And these are senior people and they start. So there are avenues where you can do that on a contracting consulting basis because people need it. There are also a whole bunch of avenues. Clever organisations have now started creating higher technical categories. So have a hunt around and see what there is within your organisation or in other organisations. You will find quite often, certainly in the commercial sector and a little bit in government, there are jobs for people who just do very technical, sort of like project managers, or even think about an actuary. An actuary is a person who largely works alone. They work out models for insurance. They work out how much it's going to cost to insure a house or a life or whatever it is. And that's statistical analysis. Very technical, very in-depth, but highly valued. So these guys and girls get paid a monster. Now you don't need to necessarily go, I don't want to be a manager, therefore it cuts me off the knees. Not true. Just need to be a bit lateral. So, pick up all of these. Start working on it now. So this whole 33% every 3 years, well, it should probably take you about a 3-year cycle to get the experience and the skills and have thought about it and built the network and do what you need to do. But in 3 years, you can do a lot. You can do a tertiary qualification in 3 years. You can demonstrate 3 years of leadership experience. You can actually achieve a heck of a lot. And then you know what? The next promotion that you go to probably is going to give you a 33% pay rise. But you do need to put probably an hour a week into it. Maybe even 2. So there are 3 ways we come across it increasing your income. You might not want to get a promotion. You might say, you know what? I don't want to run a business. Most businesses, the majority of businesses in Australia are bankrupt within 5 years. Now, I don't want to be too pessimistic about that, but they looked at a survey of young adults who had become millionaires by the age 30. And they found a group of these people. This is an American study, but it's pretty typical in Australia as well. Do you know how many businesses those people have started on average? Anyone will pick a guess? Throw a number out. Up. 5? No. Up. Higher. 20. Pretty close. 18. The average number of businesses people have started was 18 businesses. Now, does that mean they all failed? No, certainly not. Some of them, they had multiple businesses running concurrently. But the reality of it is, it took them a long time to gain the skills to be a successful business person. So you might not want to do that. You can increase your salary with raises and promotions and the rest, but this is sort of my pathline on the side. So rent from rental properties and shares is ticking along building passive income. Now you can do that in a whole bunch of ways, and I've used this model. It's a little bit blurry at the back maybe, so I'll walk you through it. The idea is at the top we've got a business owner, someone who puts $50,000 into a business to set up a cafe, consultancy, it doesn't really matter what they're doing. And essentially for the first year, they put in that $50,000 and they manage to survive. They don't make a profit the next year. They make a small profit the following year, and that profit gradually goes up. It's a little bit up and down. They have a bad year there. And then they go along, and after 10 years, they sell the business for $300,000. They make a bit less because they sell it halfway through the year, and then they walk out. And over 10 years, they made $1.17 billion of hard graft. Anybody here run a small business? Yeah? Is it easy? It's not. It's probably, it may be the most satisfying work you'll ever do if you pick the right one, but I can just about guarantee it's going to be the hardest you've ever worked, and with most stress and responsibility and volatility of income. So that's George and Bruce. Now Bruce has a salary and starts at $67,000 and it goes up steadily, gets a promotion there, then another promotion, it goes along, same sort of job level, CPI income, and along there. Now, at the same time, he decides to save $10,000 a year for 4 years to put a deposit down on a property. And then the first year, that property costs $5,000 and $5,000 to subsidise the rent that's not paying the mortgage. And then $2,000, then it breaks even, and that's generating a small income. And around there, they're getting $10,000 a year positive cash flow. And at the same time as George sells the business, Bruce sells the property, pays the mortgage off, and ends up with $300,000, about the same as the business is worth. That income there, $1.5 million versus $1.2 million. Now these are all notional figures, but it gives you an idea that if you would take your pay rise every year and put it aside, okay, spend a bit on a holiday and the rest, but put most of it aside into a business or an investment, you're actually going to probably do better than most people. One of the other things that highlights that, if you look at this blue line, see the volatility? Starts low, bad year, so it could have a very bad year. Now there's a flip side too here for this, in terms of volatility. The business owner will probably do this for years. The salaried person, although in the real world, is generally going steadily upwards, at least with CPI and a couple of promotions. Point of redundancy, let's say they become redundant there, their income drops to zero. So it looks really steady being in a salary, and it looks nice and comfortable, and you go, I don't need to do any of this other stuff, I don't need to network, I don't need to improve my education, I don't need to do this because I've got a steady job and I'll be okay. And bingo, one day you don't have an income at all. And on the side to that, I'd probably suggest that it's really handy to have income protection insurance too, because that's the biggest risk for most of us who are whether employed or self-employed. That can be the biggest volatile event in our life if we suddenly become ill. But you can see at the end, when they both sell the house and they sell the business, they're both pretty comfortably well off. But this person has had a lot of lean years and a lot of stressful years, and it's a very different mindset. So again, my point, you don't need to even ever change jobs or even get a promotion. You can still earn more money and you can still stay in that one job. But if you've got options, how many people, and I'm not going to ask the audience, how many people know someone who goes, I hate my job? Yeah, you know what? If that person had 2 or 3 options, they were talking to other jobs, or they had a skill that was immediately marketable, even if they didn't change, you know, that probably having that peace of mind of having options out there is an amazing panacea, because you can deal with an aggro boss, you can deal with an idiot co-worker, you know, you go, no, that's okay, because tomorrow if I want to, I can leave. I'm not trapped. And it's just a real subtle difference, but if you don't feel trapped, then heck, you know what, it's actually a lot more fun. You can actually sit down and just see the joy of the stuff that you're doing, the good things. And of course you can always leave it too, if it's really that bad. So you don't have to be the person who sits there and goes, my job I've had for the last 20 years. I did work with a bloke in Department of Health who, you know, I ended up calling him final salary pension scheme because he didn't know much about his job, but what he did know to the cent was how much his final salary pension scheme was going to be worth in 11 years. I'm like, you are kidding me, really? So, this is one of the ideas we all have about businesses, as you make a huge amount of money. Well, in reality, there's a very few proportion of people make a lot of money. Bill Gates is out of the world. Most business owners earn a living somewhere around here, and there's a small proportion that go bankrupt very early. So, you know, many years ago, and it's a bit of a difference, so then I looked at the whole pyramid marketing, network selling, and they had this process, Amway and others, and they said, if you do this, you will make that. And they go, okay, interested. This is about 25 years ago before I knew better. But when I looked at it and said, okay, I see follow the bouncing ball, follow the dot. And then it occurred to me at some point, if I worked that hard in any business, I would make the same amount of money. So there's no magic to it. There's no silver bullet. There's no real way of shortcutting this stuff. A couple of final points. The reason that it's important to do this stuff: reduce stress, more money to travel, live more comfortably, retire more comfortably. Yeah. There are a whole bunch of reasons. If I was to suggest one really practical tip to do today or this weekend, it would be to sit down with a notepad, and you need a couple of hours. Well, I sat down once and wrote down 200 things like this. And just write down what having more money would allow you to do. And it sounds like an odd thing to do, but when you think about it, it is one of the ways we process the world through our subconscious mind. Our unconscious makes most of the decisions, and it's really difficult to program it to say, oh, instead of watching the footy, I'm actually going to go study for a course. Or instead of watching another soap opera, I'm going to sign up for a volunteer organisation or spend a bit of time preparing a newsletter for a group. But if you actually put it into your unconscious that these things are more important than watching a soap opera or watching a movie or whatever it might be, the way to do it is just sit down and write out. There's 100 things. If I actually just put aside an hour a week into doing these steps and networking more and to improve my marketability, sales, getting educated, getting known, thinking about preparing job application, put an hour a week into that, these are the 100 things that allow me to do it. It's pretty powerful. It's one of the ways that we can reprogram the unconscious mind to put it on the agenda, to make it an easy decision. So, follow the bouncing ball. It's about starting with more options out there and having them. And these are the things you can do. So network, get educated, gain experience. And this is a cycle. So when you get into that job that you're currently in, you basically come back and you continue doing that until the point where you decide, I'm actually getting bored with this, and maybe you decide, I don't want to earn any more money, I don't want to have any more options. Okay, it's fine. But for me, part of my satisfaction in life and what gives me contentment and reduces stress is having all this range of options to be able to do things. Not because I'm worried about something might go wrong, because there's so many great things out there to do. So many cool and exciting adventures to have, and it includes great jobs, and the more I can line up for that, the better my quality of life. So as I said, it's all about money, but ultimately it's actually all about quality of life. And that'd be the end of it. Hopefully that was a little bit useful. Does anybody have any questions?
Will the slides be available?
Small feet, yeah, we'll put them on the website. If anybody would like a copy of the template or the 2-page letter or any of that, just drop me an email. Happy to share those. Well, thank you everyone. Thanks for coming. I hope that was useful.
Thank you.
Yes.